Do you think you act by your own will? Think again. You see, ladies and gentlemen, we have been trained, conditioned, to believe there is such a thing as free will. We stand here proud, with our heads high, telling ourselves, I choose, I act, I move, of my own accord. But if we look carefully, if we look with the naked, unfiltered eye, something very peculiar begins to dawn upon us. You move your hand. You say, I decided to move my hand. Did you choose to decide? Did you know how to decide? Of course not. That's how the choice came about. I did it, you felt, and it appeared. However, if you pay close attention, you will notice that there is no discernible difference between what you do and what occurs to you. The breathing continues. It usually occurs, but you can pause it for a moment if you'd like. You can't live without your heart, but it beats without your permission. Where does the line lie then? Where does the voluntary end and the involuntary begin? It is very, very fuzzy. And because it is fuzzy, the whole story of free will begins to wobble. You may feel, I am in charge, but look deeper. You will discover a strange thing. What you call free will is a happening. Like the ripple of a wave on the ocean, like a flame dancing on the candle. Your choosing happens within a great field of happening. You cannot stand apart from it, but there is a superstition buried deep in us. A superstition that says, no, I am something quite apart from the rest of it. I command my destiny. I will, the future. I'm afraid that simply does not hold water. If you examine even the simplest moment of your life, you will see a long chain of causes and conditions, reaching far beyond what you can even imagine, shaping every little movement, every desire, every word you speak. So you are not so much the commander of your destiny, as a marvelous expression of it. We are taught to imagine a voluntary self acting upon an involuntary world. But is that really so? If you watch carefully, you will see that even the acts you call voluntary rise out of a background you do not control. They are, to use a very Chinese phrase, zirang, of themselves, spontaneous, natural. My friends, this is the unsettling reality. You did not build the nervous system if you really looked at all the hidden factors that contribute to what you think are your decisions, including social influences, the language you were taught, and the culture you were up in. You would discover that you are not as good as you think at being the captain of your ship. Yes, it seems like you make the decision, but you decide like a cloud decides to rain, or a wave decides to break. The movement is real, but the separation between you and the forces around you is quite an illusion. Where does that leave you then, if this is the case, and your valuable sense of agency is as much a happening as it is a doing? You are standing on a precarious edge, an odd threshold, where the voluntary and the involuntary merge, where your perceived choices are woven from the same fabric as your circumstances. It is precisely here, in this blurred, dreamlike zone, that we must pause and look deeper into the strange, shadowy realm, where voluntary and involuntary dance together, each depending on the other, neither quite apart. So then, here you stand. The point at which the idea of choice dissolves into the sense of fate is an intriguing one. And if you look very closely, you will discover that there is no fixed line, no distinct edge, distinguishing what you do from what occurs to you. Breathing occurs naturally most of the time. You don't control your breathing. It gives you life. You can, however, hold your breath if I ask you to. Is breathing, then, involuntary or voluntary? Consider your heartbeat. Its rhythmic pulses deliver blood to every part of your body. You can never will anything at all if it doesn't beat, even though you don't order it to. In the same way, you make decisions for yourself. You believe you can create them quickly and out of thin air. However, did you decide to have the background that led to that choice? According to our culture, the mind is a tiny boss that sits in the skull and directs the rest of the body like a foreman. However, if you pay close attention, you'll notice that your mind is inextricably linked to the deep surge beneath it, much like the crest of a wave. Without the ocean, the wave cannot move. Similarly, you can't do anything without a sea of circumstances guiding you. You are supported by everything in your life, including the people around you, the language you speak, and the oxygen you breathe. The distinction between doing and happening, between the pusher and the push, is not clearly defined. What you push pushes you back. What you move affects you. This explains why you could occasionally feel as though you are dreaming about your daily existence during a peaceful moment, with everything appearing to be floating out of your grasp, like a puppet with secret strings. And that may either frighten you or give you the most amazing sensation of freedom you have ever experienced, depending on your constitution, because you are released from the never-ending weight of attempting to control the uncontrollable. If there is no independent controller inside of you, no tiny captain of the soul, you may find that you are a process that is developing without the necessity for a controller, since it is operating flawlessly on its own. Like many others before you, you may question what this implies if you can start to see it. Is everything just decided? Is there more to the weary old argument between determinism and free choice? Or are we just passive marionettes, swaying in the breeze of circumstances? To determine whether there is any distinction at all between the self and the environment around it, we must still delve deeper into the core of what actually occurs. You could wonder, what am I if I am not a puppet, and yet I do not stand out as a separate, isolated doer? If you examine this closely, you will discover that the theories of free will and total determinism are unable to account for what is taking place. The conventional practice of dividing the universe into causes and consequences, doers and happenings, is just not going to work. You see, the behavior of what you refer to as the environment and the behavior of what you refer to as the individual are the same process. They are absolutely impossible to separate, like the two poles of a magnet or the two sides of a single coin. They move in unison. The organism cannot exist without the world in which it takes place, just as the North Pole cannot exist without the South Pole. The moment you declare, "I'll do that," when you're feeling like making a decision, comes from countless circumstances you aren't even aware of. It's still your movement, though. Like a wave rising on the ocean, it has its own power and shape, but is always a part of the water carrying it. We have been conditioned to perceive ourselves as little entities navigating a vast universe. However, such image is completely untrue. You are not a flesh machine pilot from space. Your body and ideas are manifestations of the complete field of forces that make up you. It occurs organically and spontaneously, as the Chinese have stated. The problem is that our society hasn't developed a logic that can support this yet. We continue to violently bounce back and forth. Both perspectives fall short between the illusion of being a powerless machine and the illusion of being a lone, all-powerful controller. Your choices, your thoughts, your breath, the motion of the planets, and the rise of the sun are all parts of a single dance, which is the true wonder. And that dance is you. If you pay close attention, you'll realize that everything in this universe is related to everything else. Nothing exists in isolation. You are a pattern of relationships, woven into the overall process of nature, not a single lump of consciousness, lost in a world of disparate objects. Light cannot exist without eyes to see it. Music cannot exist without ears to hear it. And an organism cannot exist without its surroundings. As I have stated numerous times, the organism shapes the environment, and the environment shapes the creature. The two move in tandem, each defining the other. Regarding everything else, you are exactly what you are. You cannot exist without the drum, the stick, the player, and the area that transmits the sound, just as a drum cannot produce sound. If you remove any of those components, the sound stops. You see, we forget that a huge field of interconnections conditions and makes possible our entire being. The food you consume, the air you breathe, the language you speak, and the ideas you inherit are all essential to who you are. You don't just chance to be surrounded by these accessories. You are woven together by these threads. Therefore, there is no clear distinction between what is voluntary and what is involuntary, because both are necessary for what you do voluntarily. In the end, there is no distinct self facing a foreign universe, just as your conscious motions depend on your heartbeat, which depends on sunshine, which depends on a star, which depends upon the galaxy. The subjective and the objective are really two sides of a single act in the grand relationship. You may remember the hologram example, in which the pattern of the entire is contained in each small piece. Similarly, every ocean wave reveals information about the entire sea. The earth, sun, wind, rainfall, and the ages of life that have preceded it have all influenced the shape of every leaf on a tree and every vein line. Nothing is in a state of isolation. Every so-called distinct entity is a transient form inside a field of relationships, which also defines and supports it. The entire pattern of the world is carried within every fragment, just as the entire organism is housed within each of its cells. Because of this, a skilled anthropologist can use a jawbone to recreate the entire organism to which it belonged based on its structure. The part is never a part, for that reason. A glimpse into the whole is provided by the part. When you perceive this clearly, you realize that what occurs to you and what you do are not fundamentally different. Just as much as your hands and your breath are part of the so-called environment, it is you. It is wonderfully expressed by the Buddhists. It's been said that life is a huge web of gems. Every jewel reflects every other one, extending in all directions to infinity. Although there isn't a master jewel or a privileged jewel, everyone's reflection is there in each. Why therefore do we fail to recognize this significant connection? What is causing us to feel so painfully isolated from the outside world? The solution is pretty unexpected, but it's fairly straightforward. Our intellect and senses serve as screening tools. Your skin, ears, and eyes are all amazing tools that are designed to filter. For example, just a small range of electromagnetic vibrations can cause your eye to react. Gamma and cosmic rays are invisible to it. Only a small portion of all sounds are audible to your ears. The others are disregarded. However, the mind is also screened, in addition to the senses. We think in terms of names, labels, and definitions, and we view the world via concepts and categories. And these turn into the slats of a Venetian blind, obstructing anything that doesn't appear important. The area of relationships is exactly what is overlooked and left out. We fail to notice the silences, the pauses, and the gaps between things. However, the pattern is made up of those exact gaps. After all, a melody is made up of both the notes and the silences in between. The same is true of life itself. We focus on the tangible, the so-called things, and we ignore the gaps between them. However, just as important as the form is the space. Space is where everything takes place. Nothing happens if there is no space. It functions as the unseen background that enables the music, much like a radio's diaphragm. We are taught to prioritize particular feelings above others, and to esteem only specific things. But when you start to let go of these prejudices, and let your consciousness expand, you find something very amazing. Everything is equally significant, as you can see. just as significant as a long discourse, is the sound of the water. A philosopher's book is as profound as a leaf moving in the wind, and you start to stand in silence, awestruck by everything you've never seen before. The sound of the rain doesn't require translation, as one Zen master so eloquently stated. Our ideas are like nets, you see. In an attempt to capture and stop the flowing world, we toss it over. Imagining we have captured their essence, we label this a shoe, that a tree, and the other a cloud. However, a cloud is not pinned to the sky by its name. The sea does not freeze when a wave is named. These are all wiggles and changing patterns. Their names are a means of reaching a consensus on how to handle them. However, nature mocks our neat boxes. A ripple in the field is what we refer to as a separate thing. It is no more distinct from the stream than a whirlpool is. We act as though it is severed when we give it a name, but it is still interwoven with everything else. We observe walls, chairs, and bodies while we sit together, but we ignore the space between them. However, room is crucial. It is a prerequisite for everything to occur. Consider music. There wouldn't be any melody, just a pointless roar, if there weren't any silence in between the sounds. We are able to relate, move, and breathe because of the space that exists between people. Similarly, every star, planet, and species is joined by the so-called empty space of the cosmos. All forms are created in this womb. Space is the foundation of a relationship, not just its setting. Similar to the pauses that reveal a pattern or a melody. When you notice that, the world changes from being a collection of disparate events to a single, harmonious, rhythmic event. Take another look at who you really are if you believe that you have free will. Like a driver behind the wheel, you are not a solid, independent entity with a dominating consciousness inside. Like a flame or a vortex, you are a process, a pattern in motion. A flame is merely a flow of gases that are constantly changing shape, despite their apparent stability. Your body, thoughts, and decisions are all patterns of energy that are constantly changing and never static. That flowing pattern includes what you refer to as free will. If your heart stopped beating, you wouldn't be able to make any decisions. Just as a wave depends on the entire ocean, so too does your will depend on forces that you cannot control. You know you are not making a choice to separate yourself from the world when you perceive yourself as a flowing event. However, choosing is the world, a manifestation of its more profound currents. Therefore you can respond, I didn't mean for that to happen. That wasn't my doing. When something bad happens to you. On a deeper level though, it is still your fault. This is known to Buddhists as karma, which translates to action. To comprehend it, one does not have to believe in a past existence. Karma says your life is the unfolding of the same process as the world. Therefore, what you do and what occurs to you are inextricably linked. It's similar to fencing with your own hands, or playing chess by yourself. Both hands belong to the same person, yet one tries to resist, while the other strives to win. As much as your bones and breath are yours, your so-called free will operates inside a huge set of conditions, many of which are invisible to you. You're using one part of yourself to do the surroundings, and another part of yourself to do your body. These appear to be distinct from one another. They are playing hide and seek in a single movement. The majority of people engage in an odd game. They act so convincingly that they forget it's a game and act as though they are a part. The Buddhists refer to this as avidya, which is typically translated as ignorance. But perhaps forgetting is a better way to put it. It is comparable to a toddler playing hide and seek, where she hides so well that she is unable to locate herself. Similarly, we are afraid to look behind the curtain and shelter behind the narrative of a distinct ego with free agency. But whether you recall your role in it or not, the world continues. Your heart continues to beat, the stars continue to shine, and you continue to make decisions. But you didn't choose to breathe or be born. The realization that you are the very energy of the universe, posing as a lone, small individual, is both freeing and terrifying when you see through this forgetfulness. To add to the excitement of being discovered, the game includes the drama of getting lost. You may now question whether everything is related. Is there any freedom at all if every decision is based on circumstances that are out of my control? But take a deeper look. You find a peculiar kind of liberation when you understand that who you are is the full pattern of creation manifesting itself. The freedom of the entire dance flowing through you, not the freedom of a tiny puppet tugging its own strings. It resembles the liberty of a wave sweeping across the sea. The wave is unable to decide whether to travel east or stop. It travels with the waves. It can, however, freely express its crest, shape, and rhythm within that movement. Therefore, your freedom is to ride life, to feel its power flow through you, and to move with it, rather than to stand aside from it, because there is no fear of losing control over something that was never yours to command in the first place. This is a freedom beyond freedom. See, this whole thing is more or less a cosmic game that is played by what we might refer to as the universe's energy. To play fully, it forgets itself, creates players, and creates rules. Youngsters are inherently aware of this. They immerse themselves in games with intense commitment and quickly forget them after they are over. However, adults become so preoccupied with adhering to the rules of their preferred game that they mistake it for reality. We suffer because we think that our distinct identity and purported free will are the true causes. However, it is only one of many masks, donned for experience's sake. What then does it mean to lead a responsible life? To realize that you are a pattern inside the world, not to push it around or act as though you are outside of it. You move more elegantly, with less effort and more love, when you realize that the dance is yours. This awareness gives you a new sense of duty. You're accountable, in the sense of being totally present for your role in the harmony, rather than in the sense of controlling. There isn't a separation in the end, my friends. You are the only one with a strong will, controlling the cosmos like a puppet master. The universe exists solely through you, as you, and manifests itself in each and every breath. You may let go of the unachievable weight of being the only controller once you realize that you are the dance itself, and that there is no separation between you and the outside world. You can relax. Like a wave on the ocean, you can rely on life to carry you. You may be sure you're welcome here. As essential as rain, and as natural as sunlight, they are woven into this enormous design. And perhaps you realize that your dreams, heartaches, victories, and hardships are not the result of your own willpower, but rather are tangible evidence that you are a part of something much greater, something amazing, and something that encompasses you fully. This implies that the pattern incorporates your errors as well. They belong, along with your regrets, anxieties, and even the things you wish you could take away. You don't have to judge yourself because you're afraid of making a mistake, because they are a part of the world, and are becoming conscious of themselves through your tale. Perhaps the greatest freedom of all is that you are already living your life as you are, and that you are sufficient